Hi, this is Becky from More Than Borderline, and today I'm talking about common secondary wounding experiences. You may ask, what is secondary wounding? Secondary wounding occurs when somebody injures you after a traumatic experience. An example would be somebody blaming you for a sexual assault. That's secondary wounding. Now, there are 6 forms of secondary wounding: denial, discounting, blaming the victim, ignorance, generalization, or cruelty. Denial occurs when somebody says it couldn't have happened. And a lot of times abusers will use that line. They'll say, no, this never happened, you're blowing it out of proportion, things like that. This has a lot in common with diminishing or discounting trauma. An example would be, how could this affect you so much? Other people have been through the same thing and not done what you've done, which has been said to me. And that's also very painful for a trauma survivor, to be told their trauma was no big deal. Blaming the victim is another form of secondary wounding, and you often see this in sexual assault cases. You shouldn't have worn that dress, you shouldn't have walked through that neighborhood, you shouldn't have been drinking, things like that. Blaming the victim for their trauma is often the most common form of secondary wounding, and it can be extremely traumatic to get over. I recommend therapy for anybody who has been blamed for their trauma. It's important to remember you did not choose to be a trauma victim, and therefore you do not deserve any of the blame for what happened. Ignorance of trauma is another one. That's when people just don't understand, and they say something like, well, how can you have PTSD from just basic training in the military? Not lots of soldiers who have been in combat don't have PTSD. You're just exaggerating. But no, that's a very real possibility. Generalization is one of the social consequences of being labeled a victim. People automatically generalize your statements through the lens of trauma survivor. They'll assume you're less capable, or you're mentally unstable, things like that. And cruelty is the final form of secondary wounding. And I really can't think of an example for that, but many secondary wounding experiences feel cruel. One example of cruelty, now that I think about it, is just is retaliation against the victim for reporting the trauma, or just striking someone who is crying, things like that. Anyway, that's secondary wounding, and for more information, you can look up secondary wounding on the internet and Google it and hopefully learn something. Take care.